Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lore and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. So recently, I've been playing a little bit of God of War on the PS2. A little bit. The reason I say a little bit is because I'm not sure I'm going to go back and finish it, because this game, barely even an hour in, is already boring me to tears with just simplistic combat. It's poor storytelling, poor visuals, poor combat, poor level design. In general, I don't really think there's anything positive about the original God of War. The only reason I'm playing the game, the only reason I really have any kind of nostalgic feelings towards it at all is because this is one of those games that I saw on G4 back in the day that really, really emphasized like, oh, this is the future of gaming. Look at how violent it is. Look at how like graphic it is. Look at like these QTEs. Look at these crazy bosses. Like at the time, the game didn't look great, but like, I thought that, maybe I could check it out and maybe I would enjoy it for what it was, all right? Like, I thought I would have some kind of appreciation for God of War for what it was. And in a weird way, that kind of did happen because, as I got older, I got into like other action games, stuff like Beautiful Joe, stuff like Bayonetta, God Hand, and even the original Devil May Cry, all of which that I much, much prefer over this. If anything, God of War, it feels like this was an attempt by Sony Santa Monica to dumb down the Devil May Cry formula to the point where where a Call of Duty playing dude bro can just pop in, pop in the game in his PS2 and then like pull off all these crazy combos because that's what it feels like. The way Kratos swings his like swords around on the chains, like it feels like it's a Devil May Cry game with none of the nuance, none of the subtleties, none of the intricacies, none of the skill required to really excel at combat. And that's not even like going into the games that like improved on the Devil May Cry formula. Stuff like Ninja Gaiden Black and the original Bayonetta. Like Kratos is essentially the Crash Bandicoot of Devil May Cry clones in that it does nothing well, but because of the marketing machine, because like a whole bunch of people who only own PS2s were rabid about anything that came out on the console, anything exclusive that came out on the console. God of War got a huge following before release because the developers assured us this would be a mature story featuring mature themes. And it's really kind of interesting thinking about this I hate to call myself a fan of Greek mythology or culture or anything like that because I still very much feel like I'm a neophyte when it comes to this kind of thing. But even with my very plebeian knowledge of like Greek culture, history, the gods, and stuff like that, even I can tell you that like God of War is filled with all these not only mythological inaccuracies with how like the gods are depicted and how they like send champions out on their errands and stuff like that. The culture of Sparta, the usage of certain monsters and stuff like that. Like there's all these things you can like talk about when it comes to God of War, but like when all is said and done, like, you know, creative liberties are a thing, all right? But when I look at God of War, when I look at what it tries to accomplish, like, it reminds me very much of Persona 5. It reminds me of how Persona 5 really struck me as this very immature, very childish, very simplistic narrative that really, really, really wanted to pretend as if it had something deep and insightful to say about society. Anyone who's like really thought critically about Persona 5's plot understands that like the Phantom Thieves have way too much power and they have no right to be going around, in messing around with other people's business. They are causing all these problems. They are essentially taking away people's like autonomy and free will, but nobody really cares because they're the good guys. In fact, that's kind of like the big twist at the end, from what I understand, is that like the bad guy is like doing the same thing as you, but like, ooh, he's doing it, he's evil, but really it comes down to the same thing, right? In that Persona 5 really wants you to think that it's a lot more deep than it really is. And God of War is the exact same kind of thing, in which it is a PlayStation's attempt at utilizing the iconic Greek tragedy into a video game. And it just Kratos is such an unlikable character, right? Like right off the bat. Like you don't know anything about him. Like he's just some asshole who killed a bunch of people and like he's going around fighting monsters. And ooh, he's plagued by nightmares because of all the terrible things he's done. And he's running these errands for the gods in hopes that someday he will become free of it. It strikes me that when I compare it to like an actual Greek tragedy, like when you compare it to like one of my favorite Audible books that I've ever listened to, what was it called? It was like I posted it on my community tab at one point, but it was basically like a compilation of like classic Greek mythology. I believe like there was a lot of stuff in there. So when I compare that to God of War and what that's trying to convey, you get this impression that like David Jaff is just trying to convince you that this is a tragedy. He's trying to like they're doing this weird thing where they're trying to present the world as being like cruel and malicious and like evil and chaotic and stuff like that. Like this world of like violence and strife, but like there's this really weird dissonance between like depicting that and then depicting the character of Kratos. Like not even just how like he ruthlessly kills people that he's that other video game characters would save. Like this guy is like going into a war zone banging bitches. I don't understand this. Like he goes into like he sails into like Athens with like a couple of whores. And yeah, and you really get this impression that like they the creators really wanted to lean into like the fan servicey aspect while like pretending the character is like tortured or whatever. And there's no real reason to think that, honestly. Like what exactly has Kratos done that's like makes him sympathetic or an interesting character? And that's kind of an interesting thing to think about because already I have a deep dislike for the character and like his actions, the way he conducts himself, the way he fights, the action, the set pieces, like his motivations, all of it doesn't really make any sense to me. But like the thing is, I explicitly remember growing up that like that was a very very strong criticism of the character, and that like he is immoral and like he's too much of a try hard edge lord, and it's interesting to me to see like God of War 2018 try to do this thing where like it scales back the character and tries to make him more like of a Hollywood style tired retired badass or whatever, where he's just like going out killing people even though he doesn't really want to anymore. Like it's the same kind of thing. It's weird to see the same people who I'm sure played God of War back in the day turn around and like praise the reboot, because to me it seems like the original is trying to do something very very specific, trying to make really trying to like make a truly villainous reprehensible character, or an anti-hero at the very least, or an anti-villain. I haven't played enough of the game to really classify it. Like I feel like the original was trying to do something very specific with the character, and then they scaled it back. They regressed. They went in this direction that just doesn't really make sense. Like even like 5 seconds into like the original game, you can kind of tell that like uh how exactly 2018 just seems forced in comparison. And as a result of that, like if you're a fan of the original God of War trilogy, why exactly have you stuck with the series for so long? Because the character was deeply flawed to begin with. He wasn't interesting. He wasn't compelling. He wasn't fun to play. There was nothing about the character that was interesting. Even critics acknowledged that the character was like reprehensible and just not fun to play as. And now that they're going with a completely different direction of it with it, like where's the continuity? Where is like the feeling that like this is a natural progression of where the character started out from? There's just no there is no tragedy essentially because at some point Kratos should just die and then we move on to the next hero, the next figure in Greek mythology, to go on adventures on behalf of the gods. Like the thing is, Kratos, I think more than any other PlayStation character in history has long overstayed his welcome. Even by the time God of War 2 came out, people were saying that the thing was played out and that it didn't make any sense. Like I believe God of War like 2 begins with like you going up against Zeus, which I suppose is like the next natural step upward from Ares. You go up against Zeus, and then at the end he like blasts you off Olympus, and you end up in Hades, and then like God of War 3 is just like you fighting out of Hades, and then going back to Olympus, like doing the same thing you did in 2. Like what exactly? It's so contrived the situations this character gets into. Like it's weird to see him like throwing around like giant Hydra heads like 1 second and then like struggling to open a door the next. Like am I really supposed to believe that like he needed to get a key from the captain to open a door? No, it's just that just doesn't make any sense. Like, he couldn't just break it down, like he can say you can say whatever you want. Like the series fails on like a variety of fronts. Like it doesn't work as a tragedy. It doesn't work as an adaptation of Greek mythology. It doesn't work as like an action game. It doesn't work on like essentially any level you can think of. Like the series was old, stale, and tired from its very inception. And I think like, playing it for the first time, experiencing this firsthand, I can see why Devil May Cry fans back in the day really reviled the God of War franchise because for a brief period of time, this was considered the gold standard when it came to PS2 action games, even though like it was ill-deserved and didn't really make any sense. And even critics were put off by it by the end of it. It's a baby's first action game, like it's a parody of what people think games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta are about. It's just not interesting. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. It's not memorable. If I didn't see this on TV back in the day when I was way too young to be seeing it, I probably wouldn't have remembered it at all as an adult.